Georgetown Learning Centers here in Charlottesville, and we're a tutoring and test prep company. And so I just wanted to take a moment to thank Mr. Johnson for inviting me to speak here tonight, and I'm going to be talking about the college admissions testing process. So how many of you are seniors? Okay, so I come seniors, juniors? Okay, so, and any 9th or 10th graders? Okay, great. So we'll be going through the testing timeline too, so when you need to take these tests. Okay, so first I'm going to discuss the testing timeline and which standardized tests you need to take 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And then I'll be discussing the differences between the SAT and the ACT, which are the two primary standardized tests for college admissions. And then at the end, open up to Q&A. So testing timeline. So if you're in 10th grade, you'll be taking the PSAT on October 15th. It's coming up soon. It's less than a month away. And if you're 11th grade, you'll also be taking the PSAT. Albemarle County Schools pay for all 10th and 11th graders to take the PSAT in October. And then your 11th grade year, you need to decide if you're going to take the SAT or the ACT. And also you need to sign up for SAT subject tests if you need those for the colleges you're applying to. A lot of competitive schools will strongly recommend or require students to take 2 or 3 SAT subject tests, so that's something to be thinking about your junior year. And then senior year, that's the time, right now, actually the early fall, so September and October, that's the time to be retaking the SAT or ACT, or taking any SAT subject tests that you might need for applications in the early fall so that you get those scores in by the admissions deadlines for colleges. And the PSATs, if you're a 10th grader or 11th grader, and you're taking PSATs in October, you'll get those scores back in January. I'll actually be coming back to give a talk on interpreting PSAT scores in January. PSAT is about half the length of the SAT or ACT. That's a big difference between the two. Most juniors will take the SAT or ACT in the spring, and then most seniors will take it in the fall. So next we just have a calendar of the test dates. So all of the SATs here, all those test dates, those are all offered in Charlottesville. The one thing to point out is the March test date here. You can only take the regular SAT that day. You can't take SAT subject test that day. Most juniors take SAT subject tests in May or June. And you can see the SAT is offered almost every month during the school year. ACT is offered in Charlottesville in September and then December through June. The October test date is not offered in Albemarle County, but is offered in nearby counties. So if you need to take that before you apply to college, you can. You just might have to drive a little bit further to take it. So when to take the test. So things to think about, first of all, is your courses. So you have to think about your course load and try to pick a time when you won't be overwhelmed. So juniors in Algebra 2, for example, they should take the March test date or later because the SAT, well, and the ACT both cover math through Algebra 2. So you want to wait until later in your junior year to take it so you've had all the math you needed. However, if you're a junior and you've already had Algebra 2, say you're in pre-calc, trig, or calculus, you can really take the SAT at any point during your junior year. You have all the math skills that you need. So the other thing to think about is sports. So if you're playing any sports this year, whether it's a fall, winter, or spring sport, consider how your practices and your games might affect with any test prep or studying that you do, and also the test date itself. Make sure you don't have a big meet or a match on the test date itself. So for example, if you're a fall athlete, you might and you're a junior and you're a fall athlete, you might want to wait until winter time when you have more time to study and prepare for the test before you take it. And then AP exams. How many of you guys are taking AP classes right now? Got a handful? All right, great. So AP classes are great. It's great for college admissions. And the AP exams, if you sit for those are the first 2 weeks in May. So if you're taking a lot of APs, that May SAT date might not be the best fit. However, if you want to take subject tests you're already studying for, say, AP US History, and you're gonna take the subject test in US History, May or June are great dates to do those because you've already prepared for the AP exam and it's the same material on the SAT subject test. So subject tests you want to take in May or June, either run APs or final exams. I tell students if they need them, and not everyone needs them, but if they need them, if you're applying to school like UVA and you need to take a couple subject tests, pick your 2 strongest subjects. The colleges really don't care whether it's math or science or English or history, they want to see what you're best at. So pick your 2 strongest subjects that you're taking honors or AP level classes in, and take those, get those out of the way before summer, because you don't want to have to take them in the fall of your senior year when you're rusty and you've had a few months without that coursework, because that's going to require you to go back and study that and review that subject again. Okay, so the SAT versus ACT, the differences between the two. So I'm going to be going through the handout, the black and white handout, and just talking about the differences between the 2 tests. So the SAT has regionally, historically, always been an East Coast test. Everyone on the East Coast takes the SAT, colleges and universities, except ACT scores. And then historically, the ACT has been more of a Midwestern test. For example, I'm from Illinois, and in Illinois, all the juniors are required to take the ACT, and Midwestern schools usually look at ACT scores. However, as of like 2007, all colleges and universities in the U.S. accept both SAT and ACT scores. So it doesn't matter which one you take, colleges will accept the scores. And you should also check the school's website to the colleges you're applying to see if they require the writing score. Because on the SAT, the essay is required, you have to do the essay. ACT, the writing section is optional. However, I usually tell students to take the writing section unless they're absolutely positive they don't need it, because between junior and senior year, usually your list of colleges and where you're applying changes a lot. So you don't want to be stuck in a situation in your senior year where you are applying to a grade school that requests a writing score and you don't have it. So even though the writing section is optional, I tell students to just go ahead and take that. Now some other differences is that the ACT is shorter overall. So the ACT, if you don't do the writing, it's about 3 hours. With the writing, it's about 3.5 hours. SAT is a much longer test. It's 3 hours and 45 minutes. And so some students prefer the ACT just because it's shorter. However, keep in mind on the ACT, the sections are longer. So it's a trade-off. And then the SAT, each section is graded from 200 to 800. So total score is out of 2,400 points, reading, math, and writing. Now, some colleges, when they list their average SAT scores, I'm sure you guys have looked at websites and US News and World Report before, they might just combine the reading and math. So if they say their average SAT score is 1,400, you need to double check and see if that's out of the old math and reading combo, which is 1,600 points, or if that's out of the new combo, which is 2,400 points.
Are they going back to?
They are in 2016, yeah. So that will affect this year's 9th and 10th graders, yeah. But 11th and 12th graders will be in the 2,400 point system, yeah. The ACT, each section is graded out of 36 points. And so your overall average composite score is out of 36. And the ACT has a science section. The ACT has a science section, the SAT does not. So if you prefer science, if you like science, you're good at it, ACT is a good way to go because you show your science strengths on that test. And one other thing to mention is the scoring. So if you take the SAT multiple times, so most students take the SAT 2 to 3 times. If you send all of your scores to colleges, most college admissions offices will super score your test. So they'll look at your highest reading score, your highest math, and your highest writing. So it's in your favor if you take the test multiple times to send all of those scores, not just your highest overall combined score on the best test date. Because if you score higher in reading in March and higher in math in May, colleges want to see that. They want to see your highest potential scores for each of the sections. The ACT, when you order a score report to send to the ACT, it just sends one test date at a time. So if you took the ACT multiple times, you just need to send all of those test score reports separately to the colleges. Okay, so scoring. So the SAT and ACT, you get 1 point if questions right. All the questions are worth the same, they're just worth 1 point. If you get a question wrong on the SAT, you lose a quarter point. So what that means is you should only make educated guesses if you're not sure of your answer. If you have no idea on a question on the SAT, you're better off just leaving it blank. The ACT is a little bit less stressful because there's no penalty for incorrect answers. So it's either 1 point if you get it right, 0 points if it's wrong, or you leave it blank. So what that means is you should guess if you have no idea, or if you're running out of time on the ACT, you should guess, even if it's just bubbling in C, when you're running out of time on that. So I mentioned the scoring before. SATs, each section from 200 to 800. ACT, each section from 1 to 36. So our average test scores. So for juniors, the average SAT scores are about 500 points per section, which is an overall of 1,500, about 1,500. ACT, your average score is 21 for each section, and about 21, and overall composite score is about 21. So if you're taking the SAT or ACT for the first time, you're not sure how to interpret your scores, like how did you do, that's the average scores for juniors in the US. So you can kind of use that as a basis of comparison, see where you fall and what you study. Okay, so content for the math, the SAT covers math, basic math skills like middle school math, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So like I was saying before, if you've already had Algebra 2, you can sign up for the SAT at any point. If you're currently taking Algebra 2, you should probably wait until the end of the school year, or the end of that course, so that you have all the Algebra 2 skills that you need. ACT covers math through trigonometry. But if you haven't had trig, or if you're not taking trig, you shouldn't shy away from the ACT because there's only 2 to 5 trig questions on every test. So if you haven't had trig, you can guess on the trig questions. Sometimes the trig questions might look familiar from the geometry course that you took. So you shouldn't let that limit you as far as deciding which test to take. But the ACT math is a little bit more advanced in general. The critical reading, the SAT covers reading comprehension skills and sentence completion. The sentence completion tests your vocabulary. So that's why people have, the 500 SAT vocab word list. That's what they're using those for, is to study for sentence completion. ACT is only reading comprehension skills. There is some vocab in context, so they'll ask you what a word means in the context of the reading passage, but they don't have a separate vocabulary section. So if you're not a big fan of memorizing hundreds of vocab words, ACT is a little bit better for that. Now the English section for the multiple choice English, SAT tests a wide variety of grammatical errors like pronoun usage, adjectives, adverbs, verb errors. ACT tests grammar, punctuation, and syntax. So ACT is a little bit more detail oriented. So ACT grammar tests not just the grammar rules, but also punctuation rules. And the science, there's no science on the SAT, but on the ACT, there's a science section. It tests your problem solving skills. So it'll give you a short passage, maybe with a chart or a graph or a table, and you have to answer questions and interpret the data. So it does not test prior scientific knowledge. So you don't have to have all the biology terms memorized or all the physics equations memorized. It will give you all the information you need to answer the questions. So if you've had at least one science course in high school, particularly if you've had a lab, that's really great. You should be able to study and perform well on the science part of the test. The passages and questions usually ask about biology, chemistry, physics, or science. But it's okay if you haven't had all the science courses. It will give you all the information in that reading and chart and data tables to answer the questions and interpret the data. So it's testing your scientific reasoning skills. So the essay section, one major difference for the essay is that the essay is always the first section of the test. It's always the first 25 minutes of the test. And ACT, it's always the last section of the test. So if you're anxious about the writing and you want to get it out of the way, SAT is a good option because you do it first and then you're done with the writing and you don't have to write anymore. Both of them test your skills at forming a written argument. ACT, usually the topic relates something to school or education. So for example, should students have to have a C average or above to get a driver's license? Do you agree or disagree? And then you have 30 minutes to write an argument for or against that statement. The essay is technically optional, but like I said, you should do the essay. Some schools require it. But schools do different things with the essay score. So some colleges use it for admissions. Some colleges use it for placement into freshman year college English classes. So if you do really well and score really well, you might place out of the first English course that you have to take. And some colleges don't look at it at all. So you want to definitely do your research and check out the colleges you're applying to and see how your essay score may or may not affect your application. Also, one thing to keep in mind is if you submit your SAT score report to a college, they can read the essay that you wrote on that test day. They have an electronic PDF. So you don't want to do poorly on the essay because colleges can, they don't always have time, but they can actually access your essay and use it as a basis of comparison to your personal statement to see what level of writing skills you have. So as far as deciding which tests to take, so some things to keep in mind, like I said, on the SAT, yeah, sorry.
I had a question about the writing section on the SAT.
Yeah.
What like subjects would there probably be, since like you said ACT is more school oriented, what could you like be asked to write?
Oh yeah, so the SAT usually asks kind of general vague questions. They'll give you a prompt or a quote, and then they'll ask you a general question like, is the grass always greener on the other side? Do you agree or disagree? And then you write your thesis, and then you support your thesis with examples from personal examples, or literature, or science, and you have about 25 minutes to write your essay. So the SAT, the good thing about it is you can come up with a bunch of sample topics ahead of time, like books you've read, or things you've been studying in history class, and apply it to a lot of the different questions. Whereas the ACT is more real life, real world scenario, how would you, it's more like debating, like how would you argue for or against whatever the issue might be at your high school, for example. So the SAT, you have, you can make educated guesses, but you shouldn't blindly guess because there is that wrong answer penalty. ACT, if you don't want to worry about should I answer this, should I not, ACT is great because you just answer all the questions. You should just answer all of them because there's no penalty if you get it wrong. SAT is good for students who are good at test taking. So if you fly through all the SOLs at your school and you do really well on any tests that involve bubbles, SAT is probably a good fit for you. It's good for students who have good reasoning skills, and might be a better fit for students who are weaker in science because there's no science section on the SAT. ACT is more content-based. So if you're a good student, you take rigorous courses, lots of honors, AP classes, straight A's, study hard. ACT is good because it's mostly content-based. There's not as many tricky questions with gotcha answers. It's more straightforward like a test you would see in your school. And it's great for students who are strong in science. I would say math and science. If you're strong at that, you can get a strong science score, which will boost your overall average composite score on that test. So that will only help you, it won't hurt you. Timing, so this is a personal preference. So some students prefer the SAT because it's several short sections. So on the SAT, all the sections are 20 to 25 minutes long. And you alternate back and forth between reading, math, and writing. So you do 20 minutes of reading, 20 minutes of math, etc. It's good for students, SAT is good for students who struggle with pacing and timing because you have more time per question on the SAT than the ACT. Not a lot, but a little bit. Every little second counts on these tests. ACT, some students prefer that because it's just a few longer sections. So you do all the English, and then you're done. And then you do all the math, and then you're done. You do all the writing, etc. So your brain can just switch gears and it doesn't have to go back and forth all the time between reading and writing. And ACT, however, there's more questions per minute. So for example, the math section on the ACT is 60 minutes and there's 60 questions. So you only have a minute per question, which isn't a lot of time. So if you're really fast at test taking and you can work quickly through problems, then the ACT is probably a good fit because you can get through all the questions in the time given. And also, if you have any learning differences or testing accommodations. Sometimes students prefer the ACT. And if you're not sure if you have testing accommodations, you should check with your school counselor because it usually takes 5 to 7 weeks to apply for accommodations. And accommodations, I mean like extra time or private testing room or a test reader, use of a laptop, etc. But if students have accommodations, it's usually extra time if they have accommodations in the classroom at school. So picking the right test. So some questions to ask yourself. First of all is which format feels right. So you should definitely take a practice test for the SAT and ACT before you register or sign up for one, because you might find that you like one better than the other, or your scores are simply higher on one than the other. And we actually offer SAT, ACT diagnostic tests if you can just take one and pass those around. So I have coupons there for free comparison tests at Georgetown Learning Centers. We have I call it the Frankenstein test because it's a combination of the SAT and ACT. So you don't have to sit through 2 full-length tests. And from that we can guess, or not guess, but we can estimate your scores on the 2 tests and give you a scoreboard and tell you which one might be a better fit. So the other thing to think about is, okay, how long can you stay without fidgeting? So like I said, the ACT is shorter overall. So if you have a hard time sitting in a testing room for almost 4 hours, ACT might be better. Overachiever or underachiever. So if you're an overachiever, like you're taking the toughest classes in school, you study all the time, ACT is really good because it's more content-based and it's similar to tests that you take at school. If you're a bright underachiever, SAT might be better for that because, like I said, SAT is great for students who are just good at taking tests and know the strategies and tricks that they need for a test like that. So girl or boy, on average, boys do better on both of these tests than girls. The gender gap is wider for the SAT than the ACT. But if I had nothing else to go on, if I just knew the gender, I would tell girls to take the ACT and boys to take the SAT. However, there's a lot of other things to consider, but if that's the only thing I was going on, in general, girls and boys perform about the same on the ACT. Boys just score a little bit higher, but not much, whereas the gap is a lot wider for the SAT, especially in the math section. So, and also, which do you think you'll do better on? So, once you've taken a practice test, you have a sense like, oh, I think I did okay on the SAT, but I really like the format of the ACT better, or man, the SAT questions were tough, but I didn't like the writing on the ACT. So you can kind of gauge which one you'll do better on just based on your confidence. So as long as you walk in on test day confident and comfortable with that test and that format, and you know the directions ahead of time, you've seen it before, you're going to perform better. You're going to perform to your highest score potential just with walking in confidently rather than walking in and not really sure what you're up against. So how can you improve your score? So taking rigorous academic courses is really important. That's going to help you get into college no matter what. So take the hardest classes that are offered to you at your school. So take the honors level, take the AP level, and all of that material that you learn and all those test-taking skills that you learn in school will help you on the standardized test. Also read every day. Don't just read the required reading for school. Go outside the box, find something that you enjoy reading, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, or just reading the New York Times every day. If you're reading on a daily basis, you're going to be exposed to more vocabulary, and you're going to have a higher reading comprehension skill on the SAT and the ACT. And also, if you enjoy writing, that will help you on those tests too. There's an essay section on both. So write outside of class. Don't just write your research papers for school, but write for fun and write beyond what's required in school. And then if you're taking the PSAT next month, October, if you're taking the PSAT, when you get your scores back, you'll get a login and access code to the College Board website, and you'll get a My SAT Study Plan is what it's called when you log in. And the College Board has tons of great free resources for applying for the SAT. And they'll give you guidance on which sections to study for based on your PSAT results. And you can go through and look at questions you missed on the PSAT. So you have an idea of what you need to study. If you're in calculus right now, for example, you probably need to brush up on some more basic math skills with geometry. And then practice. So take a practice test, become more familiar with test directions, the timing, how to pace yourself, the types of questions that are being asked. So I handed out these coupons for a free diagnostic test. So all you have to do is call or email me, and we can schedule a time to come in and take it, and then I'll give you a score report and recommendations on which tests to take. And then there's also free practice SATs on the College Board website, so you can take one online. ACT practice tests are a little bit harder to find. You can find ACT practice questions on their website, so you can get a sense of what types of questions that are being asked. With some savvy Google skills, you can find some free polling tests online. And then you need, once you decide which test you're going to do, you need to pick a test date, keeping all those things I talked about in mind, APs, course loads, sports, etc. Once you decide, okay, SAT is the right fit for me, and you want to retake it, just stick with the SAT. Don't go back and forth and take the SAT 1 month and the ACT 1 month and then the SAT. And colleges look at that and think you can't make up your mind, I think. So just once you pick a test, stick with it. It's okay if you take both the SAT and ACT. I did, but then I decided the SAT was a better fit for me, and then I just, when I retook the test, I just retook the SAT. So keep that in mind if you're going to take either the test multiple times. So.
Did you do that because you scored better on the SAT than the ACT the first time you took it?
I did that because I actually had no prior knowledge of the ACT. My school signed me up and I just had to go in and take it. And whereas the SAT, I had prep books, I was studying, and so I was just more familiar with that, yeah. And I had to take the ACT on my birthday, which was not the best way to spend a birthday. So. And then once you decide which test dates you're going to take, register on collegeboard.org or actstudent.org and study. That's really important. Practice makes perfect. So has everyone entered, if they want to sign up for free SAT